I never believed in fate, not until that cold morning, when I heard a cry coming from a trash can behind the marketplace. That cry, it changed my life. And 18 years later, that same cry returned, this time, as a man knocking at my door. The harmattan wind swept through the narrow streets of Ogbomosho, carrying with it the scent of dust and dying leaves. It was 5:30 a.m., and the world felt suspended between night and day. I had just finished sweeping the small kiosk where I sold roasted corn, my weathered hands gripping the old broom that had served me faithfully for 3 years. The sun hadn't even risen properly yet, painting the sky in muted shades of grey and amber, and the street was still cloaked in that peculiar silence that comes just before a market town awakens. My name is Ebra Okafor, and at 26, I had already learned that life rarely unfolds according to our plans. The market stall was my entire world, a small wooden structure with a corrugated iron roof that leaked during the rainy season and became an oven during the dry months. But it was mine, and through years of saving every naira, every kobo, dreaming of something better while accepting what was. That morning, as I prepared to arrange my corn for the day's sales, I heard it. A faint cry, barely audible above the distant sound of early morning traffic from the main road. At first, I thought it was a kitten. We had many strays in the market area, and their cries often echoed through the narrow alleys between the shops, but something about this cry was different. It had a quality that seemed to reach directly into my chest, tugging at something deep within me. I paused in my sweeping, tilting my head to listen more carefully. The cry came again, weaker this time, almost pleading. I followed the sound, my bare feet silent on the packed earth, moving past the closed stalls of my neighbor's Mama Kemi who sold tomatoes, Boba Soul with his bicycle repair shop, and the small pharmacy where we bought our medicines when we could afford them. The cry led me to the back of the marketplace, where the abandoned shop of the old tailor stood like a forgotten monument to better times. Behind the shop, next to the rusted trash bin that the area boys emptied twice a week, I found the source of the cry. And in that moment, my world shifted on its axis. Wrapped in a dirty cloth that might have once been white, shivering and barely moving, was a baby. A newborn, from the looks of it. His skin was pale, almost translucent, with a blue tinge around his lips that made my heart race with alarm. His tiny fists were clenched, and his cries had become weaker, more desperate. For a moment, I simply stood there, paralyzed by the enormity of what I was seeing. Who would dump a baby here? What kind of desperation drives a person to such an act? I looked around frantically, hoping to see someone who might claim this child, who might explain this impossible situation, but the street was empty. The market was silent. There was only me, a struggling corn seller, and this tiny human being who had somehow been placed in my path. I knelt beside the trash bin, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The baby's eyes were closed, but his chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Without thinking, following some instinct I didn't even know I possessed, I reached out and carefully lifted him from the makeshift bed of refuse. The moment my arms closed around him, something miraculous happened. He stopped crying. His tiny body relaxed against mine, and for the first time since I'd found him, he seemed to breathe easier. It was as if he had been waiting for me, as if somehow, in his newborn wisdom, he knew that I would come. I stood there in the growing dawnlight, holding this stranger's child, and felt something shift in my soul. This was not a chance. This was not an accident. This was destiny presenting itself in the most unlikely form. I ran through the streets of Ogbomoso with the baby pressed against my chest, my heart hammering with a mixture of fear and determination. The sun was beginning to rise now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the first early risers were beginning to appear, the bread sellers with their bicycles loaded with loaves, the women carrying water on their heads, the children beginning their trek to school. My destination was the small compound where Mama Eda lived. She was 73 years old, a traditional birth attendant who had delivered half the babies in our area over the past 4 decades. If anyone would know what to do, it would be her. I found her in her small kitchen, preparing her morning tea over a kerosene stove. She looked up as I burst through her door, my chest heaving, the baby still cradled in my arms. Ebora, what is this? What are you carrying? Mama Ada, please help me. I found him. Behind the market. In the trash. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of the baby. Without a word, she cleared her small wooden table and gestured for me to lay him down. Her hands, skilled from decades of experience, moved over his tiny body with gentle efficiency. This child is maybe 1-2 days old, she said, her voice grave. He's dehydrated. Cold. Whoever left him, they left him to die. The words hit me like a physical blow. Someone had wanted this baby to die. Someone had looked at this perfect little human and decided he was not worth saving. We need to get him warm, get some milk into him, Mama Ada continued, already moving to heat water on her stove. But Ebra, this baby needs medical attention. Real medical attention. Not just what I can do here. She helped me clean him carefully, using warm water and gentle soap. As we walked, I watched his face, memorizing every detail, the shape of his eyes, the tiny nose, the way his lips moved as if he was trying to speak. When we wrapped him in clean cloth that Mama Ada provided, he seemed to relax even more. Take him to the hospital, she said, preparing a small bottle with diluted milk. Or to the police. They have procedures for abandoned children. But even as she spoke, I knew I wouldn't do either. Something in my heart had already made the decision. This baby had been placed in my path for a reason. Maybe his mother was young and scared. Maybe she was poor and desperate. Maybe she was hoping that someone would find him and give him the life she couldn't provide. I used the small money I had been saving for new corn stock, money that represented weeks of careful saving, of choosing to walk instead of taking a bus, of eating less so I could save more. I bought baby clothes from the market, medicine from the pharmacy, and a proper feeding bottle from the general store. Everyone had an opinion about what I should do. The women at the market clucked their tongues and told me I was foolish. Take him to the police station, they said. Let them deal with it. You're just a poor girl. How can you raise a child? But I couldn't. Every time I looked at him, every time I held him, I felt something I had never experienced before, a love so fierce and protective that it frightened me. This wasn't just pity or temporary kindness. This was the deep, unshakable love of a mother for her child. On the third day, as I sat in my small room watching him sleep in the wooden crate I had lined with soft cloth to serve as his bed, I made my decision official. I would raise him as my own. I would give him a name, a family, a future. Chinedu, I whispered to him as he slept. God leads. That's what your name means. Because God led me to you, and now God will lead us both. Raising Chinedu was like trying to nurture a flower in concrete, beautiful, miraculous, but requiring constant vigilance and sacrifice. My small room above the market became our world, a space barely large enough for one person that now housed two lives intertwined by love and necessity. The nights were the hardest. Chinedu would wake every few hours, crying for milk, for warmth, for the comfort of being held. I would sit on my small bed, my back against the wall, feeding him by the light of a kerosene lamp, humming the songs my own mother had sung to me before she passed away when I was 16. There were days when I didn't eat so that Chinedu could have milk. Days when I would choose between buying medicine for him or food for myself. The choice was always easy. His needs came first, always. I watched him grow from a fragile infant into a curious toddler, marveling at each milestone as if it were a miracle, and perhaps it was. Because Chinedu wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. By his second birthday, he was speaking in full sentences, asking questions that amazed the adults around him. Mommy, why does the sun go away at night? Mommy, where do the birds go when it rains? Mommy, why do some people have more money than others? I would answer as best I could, but often his questions were beyond my limited education. I had only finished primary school before circumstances forced me to start working to support myself. But I was determined that Chinedu would have opportunities one never had. When he turned 4, I enrolled him in the community school run by the local church. The fees were minimal, but even minimal fees were a challenge for someone earning what I earned selling corn. I took on additional work cleaning houses in the better part of town, selling firewood during the dry season, and helping other market women with their stalls when they were sick. Chinedu took to school like a fish to water. His teacher, Mr. Emmanuel, would stop by my stall sometimes to tell me about his progress. "This boy is special, Mama Ebra," he would say. "He reads like a child twice his age. He thinks like a little philosopher. You must make sure he continues his education." But continuing his education required money I didn't have. As Chinedu grew older, his needs grew more complex. He needed books, uniforms, shoes that fit properly. He needed the kind of education that could only be found in better schools, schools that required fees I couldn't dream of paying. I began to pray harder than I had ever prayed before. Not just for daily bread, but for opportunities. For a miracle that would give my son the future he deserved. The miracle came in the form of 2 visitors to our market on a Tuesday morning when Chinedu was 10 years old. They were a missionary couple from America, Dr. James and Mrs. Sarah Mitchell, who had come to Nigeria to work with local churches and schools, providing medical care and educational support to underserved communities. They had heard about a particularly bright student at the community school and had come to meet him. That student was Chinedu. I watched from my corn stall as they spoke with him, their faces lighting up with amazement at his responses to their questions. He spoke to them in English that was better than many adults in our area, and discussed topics that went far beyond what a typical 10-year-old would know. Later, they came to my stall. "Are you Chinedu's mother?" Mrs. Mitchell asked, her voice gentle but direct. "Yes," I replied, my heart pounding. I had no idea what they wanted, but their interest in my son both thrilled and terrified me. "Your son is remarkably gifted," Dr. Mitchell said. "His teacher tells us he's reading at a high school level. His understanding of mathematics is exceptional. With the right opportunities, he could achieve anything." They explained their proposal carefully, sensitively, but each word felt like a dagger to my heart. They wanted to take Chinedu to the city, to enroll him in a better school, to provide him with opportunities for higher education that would be impossible in our small market town. "We would make sure he's well cared for," Mrs. Mitchell assured me. "We have a program that places exceptional students with host families in the city. They attend excellent schools, receive tutoring, and have access to resources that will prepare them for university." University. I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. "Yes," Dr. Mitchell said. "Your son has the potential to become a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, anything he chooses. But he needs the right educational foundation." I looked across the market to where Chinedu was playing with some other children, his laughter carrying on the afternoon breeze. He was so smart, so full of potential. But he was also my son, the center of my world, the reason I got up every morning and fought to survive another day. "How long?" I asked. "At least until he finishes secondary school," Mrs. Mitchell replied. "Perhaps longer, depending on his academic progress and university opportunities. At least 8 years. 8 years without the child who had given my life meaning. 8 years of wondering how he was, if he was happy, if he remembered the woman who had raised him from a baby. But what was my pain compared to his future? What was my loneliness compared to his opportunity to escape the cycle of poverty that had trapped me? The hardest decision I ever made was saying yes to the Mitchells. The second hardest was telling Chinedu. We sat on my small bed that night, and I tried to explain in words he could understand why he needed to go away. I told him about the better schools, the opportunities, the chance to become whatever he dreamed of becoming. "But I want to stay with you, Mommy," he said, his eyes filling with tears. "I want to help you with the corn. I want to take care of you." My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. Here was this 10-year-old boy, already thinking about taking care of me, already aware of our struggles and wanting to help. "You will take care of me," I told him, holding him close. By studying hard, by becoming successful, by making me proud. That's how you take care of me. Will you come visit me? I wanted to say yes, but I knew the truth. The city was far away, and I couldn't afford the transportation cost. My work at the market tied me to this place, and I couldn't leave for extended periods without losing my income. I will always be here when you need me, I said instead. And you will always be in my heart. The day he left, I dressed him in the best clothes I could buy, a clean shirt, pressed shorts, shoes that were only slightly too big so he could grow into them. I braided his hair carefully and made sure he had a small bag with a few personal items, including a photo of the two of us taken at the market. Doctor and Mrs. Mitchell came to pick him up in their car, the first time Chinedu had ever ridden in a private vehicle. I watched him climb into the back seat, his eyes wide with excitement and fear. "I'll come back for you, Mommy," he called out the window as the car pulled away. "I promise I'll come back." I stood in the dust kicked up by their tires, waving until the car disappeared around the corner. Then I went back to my empty room and cried until I had no tears left. The years that followed were the loneliest of my life. My small room felt cavernous without Chinedu's presence. The market seemed less colorful, less alive. I continued my routine, rising early, preparing corn, serving customers, cleaning up, going home, but it all felt mechanical, empty. For the first year, I received occasional letters. Chinedu would write about his new school, his new friends, the amazing things he was learning. His handwriting improved dramatically, and his vocabulary expanded with each letter. He was striving, which filled my heart with joy even as it ached with loneliness, but gradually, the letters became less frequent. Life had taken hold of him, the demands of school, new experiences, new relationships. He was growing up in a world I couldn't imagine, becoming a person I might not recognize. After 3 years, the letters stopped altogether. I told myself this was natural. He was 13, then 14, then 15. He was becoming a young man, focused on his studies and his future. But the silence was deafening. My health began to decline. The long hours at the market, the poor nutrition, the constant worry about making ends meet, it all took its toll. I developed a persistent cough that wouldn't go away, and my joints ached constantly. Other market women began to whisper that I looked older than my years. The kiosk where I sold corn started falling apart. The roof leaked more severely each rainy season, and I couldn't afford proper repairs. During one particularly bad storm, half the structure collapsed, taking with it most of my equipment and the small amount of stock I had. I tried to rebuild, but without capital and with my declining health, it was an uphill battle. Some days I would sit on the small stool outside my damaged stall, staring at the road that led to the city, wondering if Chinedu ever thought about me. The other market women weren't unkind, but they weren't particularly supportive either. "That boy you picked up from the trash," they would say, not without malice but with a matter-of-fact cruelty, "he used you and moved on." That's what happens when you take in children that aren't your blood. Their words cut deep because they echoed my own fears. Maybe Chinedu had forgotten me. Maybe he had found a new family, a better life, and no longer needed the poor market woman who had raised him, but I never stopped praying. Every night, I would kneel beside my bed and pray for his health, his happiness, his success. I prayed that wherever he was safe and loved. And I prayed that somehow, someday, he would remember the woman who had picked him up from a trash bin and loved him as her own.